Welcome to lesson 2 of 3 in operating with fractions. And in this lesson we're going to be looking at multiplication and division of fractions, and you will see that our work with mixed fractions will come into play because that's really important in the exam questions. Also, I'm going to do a little bit of work with cancelling down, which can be helpful. Looking ahead to lesson 3, there'll be an exam practice question, but watch out for a lot more exam practice questions to be available for you after that. Okay, let's get started. A little skills check on something I call cancelling down, which is quite useful. Have a look at this. You will be used to simplifying a fraction like 16 over 20. No big deal. 4 goes into the top, 4 goes into the bottom, so you would call that 4/5. We've divided the top and bottom by the same number, we divided by 4. Okay. What if I presented it to you in this way? It's the same number, 4 times 4 is 16, 4 times 5 is 20. That is absolutely the same fraction. But cancelling down works in this way. I can cancel this 4 out by dividing the top by 4, making that 1. Divide the bottom by 4, making that 1, giving me 4/5. It really is absolutely the same thing. But where it comes in handy, I said this would be a quick skills check, so just showing you one example where it's useful. If you're sorting out this fraction, 2 multiplied by 7 multiplied by 8, all over 4 multiplied by 7. If you're sorting out a fraction like that, you could indeed multiply across the top. Well, let's do that. You could do 8 times 7, 56, double that, 112. 4 7s are 28. And then you could divide through. How many times does 28 go into 112? It's 4. But I would argue not straightforward. Watch this. If I start with this here, divide the top by 7, divide the bottom by 7. 4 goes into 8, so divide the bottom by 4. Divide the 8 by 4, leaving 2. I'm left with 2 by 2, all over 1, which is 4. Okay, just a neat little thing that can be useful. Now let's go on with multiplying fractions. When we did with fractions, we worked very hard about thinking about the technique, about making the pieces the same size. You have a quite different approach for multiplying fractions, and it's quite straightforward. Let me give you an example. 3/4 multiplied by 2/5. Okay, all you do, slap over our divisor line, multiply across the top, so I've got 3 times 2, which is 6. Multiply across the bottom, I've got 4 times 5, which is 20, and that's your answer, and that's multiplied the fraction. If you're asked to simplify it by the examiner, that would become 3/10. Okay? But you don't need to simplify it if you're not asked to. That is multiplying fractions. Let me just give you one more to try. 5/7 multiplied by 7/8. Remember, yours to pause if you want to just stop and do this yourself. I'll do this for you now. So slap over our divisor line. So I've got 5 times 7. And multiplying across the bottom, 7 times 8 gives me 35 over 56. Now, if I ask you to simplify that, you're going to have to do a bit of work. However, let me just go back to the beginning again with this question 5/7 times 7/8, which is 5 times 7 over 7 times 8, can you see we could cancel down? Divide the top by 7, divide the bottom by 7, and straight away you've got your answer 5/8. So cancelling down can be helpful in certain situations. Incidentally, these are both the correct answers. One is in simplified form. So that's a method for multiplying fractions. Really a straightforward method. Your challenge is to remember that method. We're going to now look at this with a mixed fraction. Let's have a look at a mixed fraction. We're going to try 2 3/4 multiplied by 1 3/5. Now, if you're adding these, you could add the whole number parts as one option. You just cannot do that if you're multiplying fractions. You have got to change both of these to improper or top-heavy fractions. Okay? So 2 3/4, 2 whole ones. If you've got quarters, if you've got pizza, cut into 4 pieces, 4 pieces make a whole, 2 whole ones is 8/4 plus a 3/4. I've got 11/4. Multiplied by 1 3/5. 1 whole one is 5/5. So that is 8/5. That is absolutely the same sum, but you've now put it in a way where we can use our method for multiplying. So we just multiply across the top, multiply across the bottom 4 times 5, across the bottom 4 times 5, giving me 88 over 20. I will put that back as a simplified fraction. As you'll see later, the examiner often looks for that. I'm going to start by dividing the top and bottom by 4 to give me 22 over 5. It's a bit easier to put into a mixed fraction now. I've now got fifths. I've got 22 of them. 4 whole ones makes 20/5, and that leaves me with the 2/5. That's the answer as a mixed fraction, fully simplified. That's the answer as an improper fraction. So there we have multiplication of fractions, and we've got an example with mixed fractions. What you'll find is more of a complication is division of fractions, and the examiner's reports often show that students struggle with division of fractions. So let's look at an example. 5/6 divided by 2/3. Okay, so this is a method you're going to have to learn and remember, and there's different ways of remembering this. So treat the 5/6 as fixed, it never moves. Okay, we can turn this into a multiplication if I flip that 2/3. So 2/3, which is flipped to 3 over 2, and then it's a multiplication. I'm going to finish this off and then go through it again. Now if we're treating it as a multiplication, I've got 5 multiplied by 3, multiplying across the top, 6 multiplied by 2, multiplying across the bottom, which is 15 over 12. Okay? The key thing is, if you're dividing fractions, you take the second fraction, the end fraction, and you flip that, and then we're into multiplying. So this is something students find difficult in exams. So be sure to practice that and be sure about your methods. I'm going to finish now with a division with a mixed fraction because that is the hardest of them. Okay, so here we go. We're going to have 1 1/4 divided by 2 2/3. Again, we're going to move this to top heavy in proper fractions. So 1 1/4 quarters, 4 quarters and a whole. So that's 4 quarters plus that 1, which is 5 quarters. Divided by 2 2/3. Thirds. 2 whole ones is 6 thirds. 3 thirds is 1 whole one. 2 whole ones is 6 thirds. Plus I've got those 2. That's 8 thirds. Okay, so that is our first step. We then remember, which one do I flip? Which do I flip? You have to know it's the end one. It's that fella that gets flipped every time, okay? Leave the 5 quarters alone, and we're going to change that to multiply and flip it to 3/8, which gives me 5 times 3 is 15, 4 times 8 is 32. Okay, actually that cannot be simplified. That is the answer. And there we have it. So that's division of fractions involving mixed fractions. Remember, for multiplying, multiply across the top, multiply across the bottom. If you're dividing, you have to flip the end fraction. Looking ahead to the next lesson, there'll be an exam question to practice, okay? So hopefully see you then. And don't forget, leave a like or any suggestions, just mail them to me. Thank you.